Welcome to the Fresh Freedom Podcast. As you know, this is the podcast with the freedom-loving freshman members of the House of Representatives, where we provide you a behind-the-scenes look at what is happening in Congress this week. I'm joined by my fellow conservative freshman member, Josh Burkeen from Oklahoma, and we have a guest today, Michael Cloud from Texas, who is here to welcome...
Southern Oklahoma. He's from Southern Oklahoma. Because I'm sick of the North Texas joke. He's from Southern Oklahoma.
I think that's to get me back to the last podcast.
I'm sorry, I got two Texans. That joke won't work today.
You're surrounded already.
Michael, do you want to introduce our special guest?
Oh,
from
sure.
Your home state?
I would be honored to. With us today is an amazing friend, but really somebody who's been a leader in just preserving original documents from our founding, a leader on history, and we've had the honor really of having our staff go on a tour of the Capitol with you, of course, and that's just amazing. I've watched your materials growing up and everything, so it's been awesome to watch. But with us today is fellow Texan David Barton.
I'm clapping on who you are. I'm clapping on who you are. I'm like,
or the guy that the Southern Poverty Law Center says is an extremist.
Yeah, I'm one of the most dangerous people in America, according to them.
Oh, how dare you?
Yeah.
No, and also, how did we want to know? You've got an amazing organization. It inspired me. It inspired Michael. Maybe Josh. I don't know.
Oh, he knows
involved
it.
in politics.
You keep going, and I'll add on to that.
But you know what? I honestly tell this story. People say, "So what got you involved in politics?" I say, "Well, when I was a kid, I think our pastor was tired, and he decided to, on a Sunday night, because we went to church Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, Sunday night, and on a Sunday night, the pastor put in America's Godly Heritage,
Yeah.
the series, and we watched
VHS.
it. Yeah,
it's on VHS. I've got it at home. It's on VHS.
And I was 13 years old, and I thought, this is the best church Sunday night church I've ever had. And it was really kind of my red-pilled moment, if you will. And I started becoming aware of how politics was, had an impact on the lives of believers. And so that's how I got involved. So tell us about the origin of WallBuilders.
Well, we took WallBuilders, which is an unusual name, and particularly back in 2016 when Trump got in, we got all sorts of calls about, are you helping build the wall on the southern border? Not that one. It goes back to the Bible book of Nehemiah, and it's the concept of rebuilding things that have been torn down. So you had a great nation over a period of time, enemy came in, just destroyed it, and you get Nehemiah together, and he says, hey, let's rebuild the wall, so it would be great. And so the concept is everybody doing something to rebuild the heritage, and we talk about our moral, constitutional, and religious heritage. Those three elements are what we focus on. Now, as a result of focusing on heritage, we've gotten into everything else you can think of. Back up even more. At the time we started it, I was not a history fan at all. Didn't like history. I hated it. All right, I got more white hair than all you guys put together. I got way more white hair. So back when I was in 6th grade, which is a long time ago, back then before anything was woke, my 6th grade history teacher told me that George Washington had 26 illegitimate children, giving new meaning to the phrase, Washington slept here. So that is my introduction to history, and I thought, I don't think I'm needing American history. And so that's a long time ago, back in the day. So I had that's why I was a math and science guy. I went to college, math and science scholarship, taught math and science, high school principal, hated history. And then I came across 2 original documents. One was from 1796, and it was George Washington's farewell address. I didn't like Washington because of what my history teacher told me. And I read his farewell address, and he says, America can't survive without religion and morality. And I go, wait a minute, that can't be you saying that, because my history teacher, I looked, my history teacher was all wrong. And Washington has this huge emphasis that you cannot be a patriot if you try to secularize the country. Yeah. And that's Washington's position. And I'm going, wow, I've never seen this. And the second thing I came up with was, back in school, we didn't have prayer in schools, didn't have Bible reading, anything else, because courts took that out. I found an 1844 unanimous Supreme Court decision where the Supreme Court said, look, if you're going to be a government-funded school, you're going to have the Bible in schools. We're not going to have a government-funded school. Unanimous Supreme Court? I've never heard that.
Wow.
And so we started collecting original documents. And it's so different from who we are. And so as a result, we now have tens of thousands. But while we focus on religious, moral, and constitutional foundations, we end up getting into everything that comes up. So the 1619 Project is so easy to destroy. It's one of the worst pieces of propaganda ever. There was not slavery in Jamestown in 1619. It was illegal in Jamestown in 1619. But all 50 states are teaching that as this is what America's all about, slavery and racism. Time out. America is the first nation in the world to sign a ban on slavery. We had blacks elected to office in white communities starting in 1641 in Matthias de Souza. You got black founding fathers like Wentworth Cheswell, who was elected 49 years in New Hampshire, made a Paul Revere ride up there. He was one of the great patriots. By the time you get to 1876, there's 1,000 black elected officials in America by 1876. Put in perspective, the first time Great Britain elected a black official was 1987. First time Italy elected a black official was 2010. We've been doing this since 1641, and we're the racist nation in the world? That's because we don't know our history. And so that's where we really got into collecting history, and that's what we focus on.
Where do you think the biggest, like top 2, top 3, you pick, biggest lies that are undermining our country? What do you think the biggest lies are that you're fighting?
One is the secularism concept, that you're better without religion, and the whole leftist thing now that's going Christian nationalist. And by the way, we went through and did a study on that because we want to figure out what they're after. When they start all saying the same thing at the same time, you know that they're setting up for something. And so we started looking at all the things, and there's probably a dozen different things they say make you a Christian nationalist. And the people they put in there are some of the most amazing. John Wayne apparently was a Christian nationalist in their view. So you're just talking traditional Americans. But if you think that there are God-given rights rather than government-given rights, just read the Declaration. I mean, it's simple stuff. But that's the low bar they were using. Say, you're a Christian nationalist. And so they're attacking those people. And, you know, the belief is in the political world that they're doing that to set up something kind of like the J6 stuff, January, because they'll use the Patriot Act to say it's insurrection, trying to overthrow the Constitution and government because it's a secular document and whatever. And by the way, I've got to pull out something here real quick.
He brought some
This is a new one. Well, it's not. This is new compared to the old stuff we got. Like this is from George Washington, 1783. So this is not 1783. This is much newer.
This is the actual,
That's
the original.
That's the original.
And you have
tens of thousands.
WallBuilders has tens of thousands.
And what is this? This is the.
This is Washington's farewell address.
Well, that's the 1796.
That's 1793. This is when he said farewell to the Army and he resigned from Congress. He said, I'm going back to Mount Vernon. And so the picture in the rotunda in the Capitol with Washington handing over his resignation letter, that's what you got here.
1793. So
1793.
That's before they convinced
1783. 1783. I said 1793, 1783. So what happened? 1781, we won Yorktown. 1783, they signed the peace treaty. Once they signed it, he says, "Okay, I'm out of here."
This when his eyeglass thing came about.
Mm-hmm. Where that's at Newburgh to the officers. He said, "I've grown blind in the service of my country." And by the way, we own his glasses too, his eyeglasses.
The ones he was demonstrating that they were so mad they weren't getting their pay. And he was saying,
right.
"Stay hooked with me. I've also suffered with you." And that's
they were going to have an insurrection, overthrow Congress, and they had never before seen him wear glasses. He pulled out those glasses, pulled them on, and he started saying, "I've grown blind in the service of my country," and they all start crying because we didn't know he gave up anything like that. And so they backed off insurrection against Congress. He made it really clear that you can't overthrow civil authority. So it was he had a military coup about to happen.
So in your WallBuilders Museum that some of us have actually had a chance to see just west of Fort Worth, Texas.
We have two museums now.
Oh, you do? Okay.
You got one in Las Colinas and one over in West Fort Worth in Aledo.
And you had the eyeglasses that Washington used.
You need one in Branson, Missouri.
Oh, yeah. With as much traffic as goes through there.
Oklahoma is closer. Oklahoma, you can come through Oklahoma.
North Texas is closer, you mean?
Oklahoma.
So this is from 1783, but this one is a newer one. This is called the Godless Constitution. It's done by these two professors, Kramnik and Cornell, and they go through and talk about how that the founding is secular, the document is secular, everything about it is secular. And at the end, here's what I love. At the end of the book, they tell you where you can go to find more. And so it is called a note on sources, which that's where your footnotes are. Okay, so you go to the note on sources, and it says right here, they said, we have dispensed with the usual scholarly apparatus of footnotes. Wait a minute. There's not a single footnote in the book. they would never allow one of their kids to write a paper in their class and not have footnotes, but they wrote a whole book on the godless Constitution without a single footnote. And this came out in 96. It is still being taught across the nation today. This is one of the most popular textbooks in universities. And so we're still teaching this, and so this is what kids get without a single footnote.
Yeah.
And so you got the original stuff, and you got that, and that's kind of what my education was. I had this kind of education, but there's this kind of stuff, and it's a whole different story, completely different.
So you contrast that. The only reason I have some of these quotes is because I was so inspired by your ministry, your movement that has gotten so many people across the facets of government engaged. So you contrast that with what you were referencing a while ago, that 1796 farewell address, where he says Washington speaking, which my understanding is also Madison and Hamilton helped him write it. So
and John Quincy Adams actually helped. There were several people who helped write that because they started to give it first after 4 years of president, and then there was some war going on. And he said, "No, I'll hang on for another 4." So he has 2 versions of it.
And so that quote that I first heard from you all was, "Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports, and vain would the man claim the tribute of patriotism who would labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness. Both reason and experience forbid us to expect that national morality will prevail in exclusion of religious principles." So that's an exact quote that Washington had compared against
those
lack
guys.
of footnotes.
That's right.
And thus the value of what you and Cheryl, your lovely bride in the audience who refuses to come on camera, but what you all have devoted your life and what your son's carrying on.
I want to jump on what you just said, because that quote you just gave, if you had been in American education prior to the progressive era, and progressives took public education in the 1920s, and when they did, they had a huge change in pedagogy. There's 5 specific things we can say in education today as a result of progressives. We did not do it for the first 300 years of education. In the first 300 years, we produced thinkers. In the last 100 years, we produced learners. And learners are very gullible. Whatever they learn, they repeat. They don't think about it. And so with that, you'll find that in those, from the time of Washington up until 1920, if you were in school for the first 8 years of school, once a year, you took a written exam on Washington's farewell address. You had to know it that well, that we did it 8 years of school. And that was the guideline. And it's exactly, this is exactly opposite of what Washington said. And that quote you just gave is one of the great quotes out of it. Yeah. Every kid in America used to know that. Now they know this.
Plus perpetual alliances and avoiding
That's right.
debt.
Avoid foreign entanglements. Yeah. Don't let the government get in deficit spending. All the warnings he gave is just, they're
so to be
really,
clear,
really
you
good.
think the founders' actual quotes are a better understanding
of
what the founders intended?
No.
Then
we're so much more enlightened than they were. It's just, I was just reading, we're writing a book right now that deals with World War I, Woodrow Wilson, some other things. And so at the time, John J. Pershing, they put him on the Texas border because they actually grabbed this. They actually built a permanent wall on the Texas border back in 1917, 1918, because at that time, so many Mexican insurgents were coming across and raiding and killing and going back over in Pancho Villa, et cetera. So the border wall Trump has is not the new thing. We've done that before, been there and done that. But at that point in time, with all that was going on, even with Pancho Villa and with Mexico, they have a period where they went through 35 different government leaders in a period of 24 years. And you have people like Santa Anna, the Alamo. Santa Anna was their president 11 different times. And sometimes his term of office was only 12 days or 17 days or 18 days. His longest term of office is 28 months. Now, in a period of 24 years, you've got 35 governments, and America's had one government for 237 years. I think I like our form better. But that's not the stuff we teach anymore. Yeah. And what you especially get right now in education is all nations are equal, every philosophy works, it's all going to be the same. And it's just not. It's just, there's nobody else that has our philosophy. And Washington, one of the things we learned this year that I was shocked about was we did a biography of each of the first 7 presidents, because those guys all fought in the Revolution. They were all genuine founding fathers who fought for the country. That stops with Jackson. As you get to the 8th president, he was born after it was going on. So Jackson's the last one. And what's interesting is they all took an oath to uphold the Constitution, but 2 of them have some really bad policies. And those really bad policies you get from Monroe with the Missouri Compromise, and you get with Jackson, the Trail of Tears, the financial crisis, all the things he did. And the people in his administration back then, John Quincy for one, said, look, if you're not following Washington's farewell address, the Constitution is not going to work right. You can follow the Constitution all day long, but if you don't take the spirit of the Constitution, which is Washington's farewell address, you won't get it right. And so that was particularly Jackson's problem, because he treated the Indians like they were foreign nations, which the Constitution makes that. But if you go to the Declaration aspect, and if you go to the farewell address, observe goodwill with all, and Jackson didn't do that. And so every major mess up you find in those early founding fathers was because they ignored the farewell address or the Declaration. And those are the two things we don't teach much today. And so now we've got a lot of people that are constitutional, but they're really secular, which it doesn't work the same. That quote you just gave from Washington, he said, you can't be called a patriot if you try to secularize government. And we've got a whole lot trying to do it today.
You have a number of pastors that are going to be up here that you're going to be giving a Capitol tour of. I'm really curious to hear what you're telling pastors now, and what are you telling people of faith, and what the American church should be doing right now.
The cool thing is, because of guys like you, we get to take pastors through on nighttime tours of the Capitol when there's not 10,000 visitors in there. And so with y'all's permission, we take private tours through. And because we have all these documents, we can stop in front of the statues and say, see what he's holding? Here's the original. It's in stone there, but here's the real thing. And so for pastors, what's interesting is starting in 1863, Congress passed a law that allows every state to display 2 of its heroes at the Capitol. So there's 100 statues in there from the states. There's other statues from the Capitol, like George Washington, Hamilton, others, Martin Luther King.
Bill Rogers.
There you go. That's a Northern Texas statue. Well, and by the way, what is Will Rogers looking at?
Congress.
Why?
So he can keep his eye on us.
Yeah, that's what he said. That was what he said. He said, you put me where I can keep my eye on that group.
funny.
And so that's why he's always looking at the Hall of the House is that. So that's history stuff too. But as you go through the statues, so many of the statues, and these are the greatest people in America, 2 from every state. I mean, this is an elite group. So many of them are ministers. And you start seeing how many ministers were involved in government, or involved in military, or involved in making legislation. The Bill of Rights, there's only 2 signatures at the bottom of the first 10 amendments. And one of them is John Adams, but the other is the Reverend Frederick Augustus Muhlenberg, who's a preacher who...
In Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
Right.
Actually, he was a preacher in New York at the time of the Revolution, but he's from Pennsylvania. And his brother also has a statue there. And his brother was a pastor in Pennsylvania who led his church out to fight in the Revolution, then became the 8th Virginia Brigade. 314 guys got up from his church and followed him outside. And they went all, if you go to Valley Forge, you'll see the Muhlenberg Barracks, and that's one of the statues in the camp. So we'll take the pastors through, and they're so used to being kept in a little box about this big today. Don't get out of the box, don't get involved in this. And we just take them through and show them what happened in all the rooms. And you go in the House of Representatives, where you guys are every day, and that used to be the largest church in Washington, D.C. Every Sunday, 2,000 people a week gathered in there for church service, and it was started with Thomas Jefferson back in 1801. Jefferson approved church in the Capitol, and that shocks them too. I thought they're supposed to be a secular. You just go through the history, and the Capitol itself is the best museum that exists in the United States, is what's in the Capitol.
To your point, so Jefferson, my understanding, he used to get horseback and ride as president to the Capitol to attend church every Sunday. Is that right?
He did, and only horse guys like us would care about that. But
That's right.
yeah, and he was a big horse guy.
You bring that up because there's a quote that I was utilizing under the impeachment of Mayorkas. It's in Federalist 63, and it says that impeachment is to be a bridle in the hands of the legislative body to be used upon the executive servants of the government. And, from the era where they were horseback, every one of them, they knew what a bridle was for. Whoa.
Yeah. And it's interesting. There is no topic in the Constitution that's covered more often than impeachment. 6 clauses on impeachment. There's not 6 clauses on anything else in the Constitution. That is the number one issue. And that's because they really believed in checks and balances. And the impeachment they did the most was of judges. There's over 90 different impeachment proceedings against judges.
There were 90 different impeachment procedures that Congress invoked.
90
they really
different
believed
times.
in good behavior.
90, and well, when you look at why they throw some of the early judges out, back in the Founding Father era, 1805, 6 thereabouts, you still got Founding Fathers in Congress. One judge cussed in a courtroom and they impeached him.
Congress did.
Congress did.
The rule of law mattered. Wow.
Well, the Constitution says they're there for the duration of good behavior.
Yeah.
It wasn't good behavior to cuss in the courtroom. You're gone. Today, it's got to be a felony. Maybe if you rape your daughter or you murder your wife or something else. Back then, one judge got thrown off. John Pickering got thrown off for drunkenness. He got drunk in his private life, and they said that's not good for a judge. You're gone. So they had really high standards for good behavior, and it wasn't the legal stuff. And that started with Clinton and that impeachment of Clinton. They said, "Oh no, it doesn't rise to the level of impeachable offense." Where'd that phrase come from? Because that's not in the Constitution.
Wow.
And what is the level of impeachable offense? We'll go back and look at the previous. I think there's now been 132, 133 impeachment proceedings over the course of Congress. And very few of them involve crimes. It wasn't until we got into the 1990s, 2000s that we started using crime as the
crimes
basis.
and misdemeanors, treason and bribery, and yet they had this too, our founding fathers.
And misdemeanors was not a crime. They had felonies back then, but misdemeanor just meant bad behavior.
Cussing.
Getting drunk on the bench, private life. Yep.
Wow. Okay, so you have this document. You have 10,000 plus more. So how do you acquire these? Do you have a team of people like American pickers going out, or do you buy them at auctions?
That's a great question. Back when we started, 30-something years ago, we were going out because this is before Al Gore invented the internet. So there was nothing on the internet back then, so you had to actually go places. And so we traveled all over the nation.
Now, there are people like me who follow you and think that you might have been serious there. Just clarify for everybody who thinks that you may be. Al Gore did not.
Gore
just want to make sure.
He took credit for that.
Okay.
He took
there was
credit
no
for a lot
smile
of
when you
things.
did that, Cheryl. I just.
Yeah, the straight face. So yeah, that's right. It takes a generation, maybe my old, to know what that refers to. So what happened is, as we would drive across the country, speaking of places, I just looked and go in. And I remember going in one time to a thrift store in West Hartford, Connecticut. It was 5:40 in the afternoon. And I just stopped and went in, and I had to part the dresses to get by, and there's washing machines over here and tricycles over here, and I'm just looking, who knows what's in this thrift store. And they were closing in 20 minutes, and I got at the back, in the back corner, I found a cardboard box, probably 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot tall, and it had leather-bound books in it. And they're just all thrown in there. And I opened them up, $5 a book. And I looked at it, and there's some really, really early Founding Father books in there. I wonder if this guy knows what he's got. And so I went up to the front and said, hey, and one of the books I've been looking for a long time and couldn't find. And I said, $5, you selling this? Yeah. He said, I've got some dealer coming in next week, and he'll tell me what they're worth. And I said, well, I'm here now. I'll buy. It was the personal private library of General Rufus Putnam, one of the generals in the Revolution under Washington. It was his private library. And so somebody, kids got it on inheritance. We don't know what this is. Get rid of it.
Wow.
And we get a lot of stuff because younger generation does not know the history enough to know that it's valuable or what it is. And so now, because we buy so much, there's probably 80 or 90 dealers who contact us when they get something and say, hey, you guys interested in this? And so there's a lot that comes to us, but we're always on the look, and people are helping us look, and we get amazed. It's like the George Washington glasses. We weren't looking for those, but somebody came to us and said, hey, this came from the Alexander Hamilton family. This is the glasses Hamilton gave Washington that he used. And so we have the provenance and all that, all the Hamilton kids.
Is anything that you've found been jaw-dropping for you?
Depends on how you define jaw-dropping. Some things that are jaw-dropping for me may not be jaw-dropping for anything else, but yeah, we have some absolutely unbelievable historical items. But we got something just a couple weeks ago that is jaw-dropping for me, and it may not be for anybody else, but it deals with the concept we were talking about earlier of learning versus thinking. Because thinking, if you look at the scriptures, Jesus asked more than 300 questions in the scriptures. So their form of education was asking all the time. If you look at the Founding Fathers' time, everything was a catechism up through about 1900s. A catechism is questions. And we have a stack of books. There's catechisms on electricity, there's catechisms on the Constitution, catechisms on history, catechisms on music, catechisms on science, catechisms on entomology. Everything was question form. And so with Founding Fathers, we have some of their books. One is a book from Harvard, early 1800s, and it has what they called forensics. And forensic, I didn't know what they were particularly, but it's where two students would debate each other for 2 hours on a topic that was morally ambiguous. You don't have a right or wrong answer. And the point was not what's right or wrong. Point is, can I figure out what the weaknesses in your argument are? Can I make my argument stronger? Yeah. Can I think about how to go at what you're saying? And so they would go for 2 hours at this. And one of the questions was the Boston Tea Party. What the Patriots said there, is that an act that should be condemned as civil disobedience, or is that an act that should be praised as patriotism? And you can go either way on that. So you debate that for 2 hours. And it's all about learning how to think, seeing what the weaknesses are. Mm-hmm. So we just got a letter, just the coolest thing for me, and maybe my nerd side coming through, but it's from John Quincy Adams. He's 18 years old. He's at Harvard. And he's at Harvard, and he writes a letter to his friend William Cranch, who became a very famous guy in Massachusetts. And he says, tomorrow night from 8 to 10, you and I have a forensic debate. And he just essentially trash talks him. He said, you better bring your A game because I'm going to knock you. And he just goes on all over him. And the debate. So the debate for 2 hours is over a stalk of asparagus. When you take a stalk of asparagus, did God intend you to eat the white end first or the green end first? And John Quincy Adams says, it's the white end first. I'm going to prove to you it's the white end first. I mean, he's just trash talking over a debate they're going to have on a stalk of asparagus. Wow. That's how you develop thinkers. See, nobody else will get that, but that's how you develop thinkers. And John Quincy, it was so funny because in this trash talking letter, he says, now look, I know I'm right. And if you think I'm right, and if you come over to my side, that's great. But if you want to be wrong, that's all right. I believe in the rights of conscience, and I'll let you be wrong. It's just that kind of but the humor is there. But it was really a teaching method. And we have the documentation where that in the 1920s, they said, look, we've got assembly lines, we got mass production, we got textile mills. We don't need people who think. We need people who take orders from their bosses. And that's what we did at education. We started turning out mass production.
So the son of John Adams, who history gives or not true history, but the history of those who hate God and God's place in our Constitution, really discount Adams. Mm-hmm. And yet Adams had such a profound impact and he started out defending the British, I guess, in the 1770s, 1760s,
he was
50s.
their defense attorney.
1770, he was defense attorney.
And then he turns and makes his turn with his cousin Samuel Adams, and then he becomes second president. And then,
but you know what the cool thing about the 1770 thing was? He was so committed to the rule of law that he was willing to defend the British because some of them had not violated the law. And he took on the mob mentality, and the jury made up of his peers actually acquitted those guys. And so nobody ever trashed him for what he did because you're supposed to have both sides. That was their forensic.
So that's the father of the guy you're talking about.
That's right.
So how old was John Quincy Adams? Where is the time frame of John Quincy Adams with this, where John Adams is at? Like, where is he? How old is John Adams?
When John Adams was sent as America's first ambassador over to Europe.
Okay.
John Quincy went as his official secretary. He was 10 years old.
Okay.
During the Revolution, John Quincy, when he was 14 years old, was sent to the court of Catherine the Great in Russia as a diplomat by himself at 14 years old because he spoke 7 languages. And so he's the translator for the Americans in Russia. It's like, this kid has been with the Revolution for...
And he mentored Abraham Lincoln, too, on his views on abolition.
It's interesting, He's in the House for 17 years. And in that last, and man, he is so stinking famous. Everybody knew John Quincy Adams. And so, I mean, he was not a people person per se. He was a policy guy, policy wonk. And there's all the stuff about how people gather around. He just kind of sloughed them off because he's working on policy. And at that point in time, his thing is anti-slavery. He's just all over anti-slavery. And so as the freshmen would come in, every election, they all want to be at because he's been president, he's been Secretary of State, he was appointed to the Supreme Court, unanimously turned it down. I mean, he's been everything. And he would just always kind of blow them off. And so in that last election, he was elected 1846, 1847, Abe Lincoln comes in and he gets just about 7 months with John Quincy Adams. And nobody knows Lincoln at that point in time. I mean, hadn't developed anything. He's been an atheist for most of his life to that point. It's not until 1850, 52 that he starts coming to God. We actually have the letter of the pastor, Reverend James Smith, that brought Lincoln back to God.
Wow.
And we have the Bible that the Lincolns gave James Smith as an appreciation for bringing him back to God. But at that point, he was still an atheist. But he's anti-slavery. And so John Quincy Adams comes up in 1843. He's got this 3-step plan to end slavery, but he can't get it done because the anti-slavery people said, no, your plan would end slavery in 7 years. We don't want 7 more years of slavery. We do it now. And so because they didn't pass it, we go to a civil war and we end it 20 years later rather than his 3. But it's interesting, when Lincoln became president, he said, I know a 3-step plan that'll end slavery. And he took all the JQA kind of stuff and used that for how he did the Emancipation Proclamation, ended slavery. It's fun stuff.
And this is the John Adams who raised John Quincy Adams to read the Bible. John Quincy Adams starts some Bible society, doesn't he?
John Quincy Adams is one of the founders of the American Bible Society. He was in the Massachusetts Bible Society. This is just amazing to me. Do you know John Adams, his family, has had someone serving in office consecutively for over 200 years. Today, there are still descendants of John Adams that are serving in public office. Wow. He has not missed a single generation in 200 years.
Wow.
The John Adams family has had people. John Adams was the ambassador to England. John Quincy Adams was the ambassador to England, the War of 1812. Charles Francis Adams was the ambassador to England in the Civil War. So you have 3 Adams who are all ambassadors. That's father, son, grandson, and you keep going. Every generation they've had Adamses in office. Every generation.
He's the one that, of course, has a great quote. The reason why I think history likes to discount him is because he, like Washington, was constantly talking about God's place in our government. He's the one who made the great statement that our Constitution was made only for moral and religious people. And so, wow.
And yet they want to say that there's a separation of church and state.
And there is. And they need to read what it is. Separation of church and state means the government can't tell you what to do with your religious practices. Unless, as Jefferson said, and Jefferson's the guy who coined that phrase for America. It was actually a British phrase coined by Richard Hooker, but Jefferson took it and adapted it to America. But separation of church and state was really, really simple. The government can't tell you what to do with your religion unless your religion causes someone to be injured. So if you think there's going to be human sacrifices in your religion, we're not going to let you do that. Or if it undermines decency and morality in the nation. Well, because again, Washington, religion and morality is the indispensable supports. So they called it Dionysian festivals. If you're going to have an orgy with 20 people, we're not going to let you do that. But anything else.
Something like that happened in the Senate halls recently. Kind of made a little national news.
Let's not take this into the gutter.
History kind of repeats itself, you know?
But then, and your organization today, you've been in a lot of court battles, including one that you're in today, because you dared to want to put up a poster of the founding father. And I'm going to have my team put this on the screen, but of George Washington praying, and then the question, it's Christian question mark. So tell us the story behind this and the lawsuit that's happening.
It's interesting. This atheist, Washington, D.C., the metro, what do they call it? WMATA, I think is the acronym for all the metro stuff. But the metro, they ran ads for atheists, and it said atheist question mark. And they ran ads attacking Mormons. They ran all these negative ads on religion. So we said, okay, I wonder. And so we said, Christian, we just took the atheist ad and we just used the same format. They said, Christian question mark. And they said, I don't know, you can't do that. We don't have that in D.C. You go, really? Wow. So it's okay to put atheist up, but you can't put Christian up. Wow. They said, yeah, that's controversial. And so we said, okay. And so what we did next, it's not there, but there is a picture hanging where you guys go every day. The signing of the Constitution, 20 feet high, 30 feet wide. Christie did it. And so the signing of the Constitution, we just put that picture up. We tried to purchase space for the metro where it just had the picture of the Founding Fathers only. And here's where you go. This one, as a matter of fact,
so
right
I was
there.
Just looking at it.
That's the one, yeah. That's the one. And so this one, we had that picture up with a barcode that would tell you information about these guys. And Metro said, no, that's controversial. We can't put that up.
That's in the Capitol.
It's in the Capitol. It's in the
with
people's
the barcode.
house. It's in the. Now, see, the problem is right there. See, right there beside Robert Morris, that Bible is open in Matthew 7. And so that's an open Bible, and he can't do that. And so, here, wait a minute, what happened to the First Amendment, the right of free speech, or is it only what you guys agree with? Because you agree with atheists, you agree with attacking Mormons, but you're not going to do something that's actually documented historical fact and heritage. Yeah. And so that now is in process. It's going back and forth in the courts, but we expect that to move forward. And if they don't do something with it, I wouldn't be at all surprised if the Supreme Court picks that up, because that's such an easy one. That's
This whole separation of church and state, it's a plug for your founders'
It's
Bible.
not in the Constitution. It's not in the Declaration of Independence. And yet they act like people, act like it is. Go ahead.
And let me hit that for just a second, because it comes out of a Thomas Jefferson letter that he wrote January the 1st, 1802. Well, let me get to that in a second.
Okay.
Because in that letter, it's 233 words long. It's not a long letter. That's 3 long paragraphs for Jefferson. And there's 8 words, a wall of separation between, it's actually 9 words, a wall of eternal separation between church and state, but everybody says a wall of separation between church and state. So everybody takes that clause out. So you take 8 words, there's 233. Any court in America can make a footnote with that letter. You can put the text of the letter down to the footnote. It would just be dicta. It's just showing you the reference of what's up here. Nobody puts that in. In the last 4,000 cases on the First Amendment, Thomas Jefferson was quoted more often than the First Amendment was in court cases. We get involved in a lot of federal court cases. So the courts would rather quote Thomas Jefferson's phrase than his letter or than the Constitution. So to understand Jefferson's letter, you got to go back to the letter written to him, and that letter was back in October of 1801. And so it's a letter Jeremiah Dodge, the Danbury Baptist, wrote Jefferson. Then Jefferson responds, and people don't look at the letter that caused him to respond, what he said in the rest of the letter. They look at eight words in the phrase. And so that wall of separation between church and state, over here, the Danbury Baptist said, man, we're Baptists, and we're in Connecticut, and this is a congregationalist state. We're scared to death the government's going to come in and try to regulate our religion and tell us that we can't be Baptists here in Connecticut. And Jefferson said, no, there's a wall of separation, church and state. The government will not come in and shut down your religious activities. So the wall of separation is to keep them from shutting down the activities, and that's the assurance he gave the Danbury Baptists, and now everybody uses it to shut down the activities. But that letter was written on Friday, January the 1st, 1802. 2 days later, January the 3rd, 1802, Jefferson asked Reverend John Leland to preach a church service at the Capitol in the House of Representatives. Now, if he's into separation church and state, why is Jefferson having a church service in Capitol on Sunday and asking the preacher to come preach it?
Yeah.
To say that's where history becomes so important.
So that what you just pronounced was the understanding for hundreds of years. From my understanding, the Founders Bible, shameless plug, but I'll do it anyways because it's one of my favorite possessions that you all put out 10 years ago. And it takes different areas of Scripture and it shows you historical context of where they use that Scripture. And one of the things I picked up reading of that is in 1940, the Evergreen case is where this actually reversed. Mm-hmm. But you all point out in your commentary that in 1850, somewhere around that time, the House and the Senate, the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate said, this is what there shall be no establishment of religion actually means. It means that you don't have to ascribe to a certain creed for your faith.
That's right.
Congress is not going to dictate an exact creed of doctrine, church doctrine. Mm-hmm. Congress passed that in the 1850s. 50 years after even Jefferson writes this. So it was all understood until 1940.
1854, the House and Senate Judiciary Committees came out with this long report on what separation means because there were some people objecting to religion. And they didn't want it, and they thought the government should stop it. And they said, no, you don't understand what separation of church and state means. And so that Judiciary Committee report is one of the soundest pieces of historical perspective on what religion in America is. And it's from the House and Senate Judiciary Committee. And by the way, it is very, very evangelical, and it's not squishy religion. Yeah. It is very pointed, and that was out of the House and Senate.
I think it was Alexander Solzhenitsyn who said, he was, of course, referring to the Marxist movement and everything that was going on, said that to destroy a people, you must first sever their roots. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give parents in a time like this, when history isn't being taught, when the foundations are being destroyed? This is Scripture, when the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous do?
Let me see if I'm going to try to put perspective on the overall thing going on right now. We have a legislative network. We work with about 1,000 state legislators, about 7,500, so we work with about 1,000. Last year, we monitored 152,000 pieces of state legislation. So we pretty much know what's going on in every state on virtually any issue. One of the things that I have watched for a long time is what happens with history in the states. For a number of years, I've been appointed in a bunch of states to do their history and social studies standards, and so we look over it and whatnot. And what's interesting is starting 2 years ago, we had states like Minnesota, had other states, and when you do your history standards in state, depending on the state, Texas is every 14 years. Minnesota does their history standards every 10 years to see if they're going to revise anything. So states all had, I don't know what it was for Oklahoma, what you guys had, but it's...
Yeah, each subject matter had a different
time on it. And so what happened 2 years ago in Minnesota, they said for the next 10 years in Minnesota, in our history courses, our social studies courses, we're not going to teach the American Revolution or the Civil War or World War I or World War II or the Holocaust. For the next, so you have kids that are not even exposed to that, and parents can't imagine that kids wouldn't be exposed to the Holocaust.
Yeah.
But look what's happening right now with the anti-Israel sentiment. There's 1,100 college campuses a year that hold anti-Israel events in their state campuses. What happens is parents say, well, it wasn't that bad when I was in school. Well, it may not have been, but you're not in school anymore. And now you have a complete agenda going at these kids. And so when you look at U.S. News and World Report, every year they come out with the elite colleges in America. And so if you look at that group, there was a study done 2 or 3, 5 years ago, I don't remember how long now, it wasn't that long, but they looked at how those universities treat history. And what they found was the top 76 universities in America, if you're a history major, only 23 of those universities required history major to take an American history course. So you can come through and be a history major without ever having taken an American history course. What do you do if you're a history major? Well, you become a curriculum director in public school somewhere. And you've never had an American history course? And so that's what we're facing right now. So I recommend that what you do is the way we used to teach history. Today we do dates and names and places, and that's extremely boring. Go back and read biographies. It used to be that if you wanted to study the American Revolution, you read a biography of George Washington, of Abigail Adams, and you read a biography of John Morant, Black Patriot. You had all these different and that's how you learned about things, was you read biographies, because then it's a lot more applicable. You see what happened. So the way we do it today is very boring, very dull. I recommend people go back and do biographies. We've got a bunch, but there's a lot of groups that have good biographies out, and that's just a good way to get reacquainted with history, is reading biographies.
Now, can I admit that I cheat and I watch some of your videos, preferable to reading books that you write?
Yeah, I'm a visual guy. I enjoy it.
So yeah, tell us. So for those listeners or the viewers that want to dig deeper, where do they go? You have a website, you have books, and you have
Videos.
podcasts, videos.
WallBuilders.com. WallBuilders.com, again, based on that Bible verse out of Nehemiah, getting everybody to rebuild things. So we have, we're on about 400 stations daily across the nation. We have a podcast daily. We've got a number of books that we've written that they've all been bestsellers. We've been very blessed. They've all sold really, really, really high, break the charts. We just had a new one out, and it's been #1 on Amazon for a long time now and their stuff. So we've got a lot of information that people can go there and get. Plus, we're in the midst of taking those tens of thousands of, some people say it's 160,000, I don't know how many we got, but it's tens of thousands. And we're in the process of scanning them and digitizing them and putting them all up online so people can see all that. People can see George Washington's glasses, and you can rotate it around and see all the stuff. And there's just some cool stuff there, cool stories.
Well, thank you again. I wouldn't be in politics had it not been for you. So if people are upset with me, they can blame it on
you. If you get beat up, I'm getting.
And I didn't even. So it's to me, it's an honor and it kind of completing the circle to.
Well, I tell you what, America doesn't stand a chance if good guys don't get involved. And thank you guys for doing that. You take a beating for doing it, but the rest of us appreciate that and appreciate the fire you go through. Because without good guys leading, it's like, back in Washington State, had all those good guys in Congress. And if we don't get those kind of guys back in, and we have an election coming up, everybody listen, we got an election coming up, really, really, really important. The philosophy of the people we put in office is really key. A whole lot of people wear the label but don't have the convictions. And the fact that you can quote George Washington's farewell address, that's the kind of stuff you guys are grounded in.
Videos.
Well,
probably
none
the
of us.
videos.
Yeah, thank you. But you guys are grounded, so thank you. And hopefully we'll recruit more candidates like you guys and get you a lot of help up here.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, we'd love to see some help.
Well, thank you. And thank you for joining us today. Thank you for being a subscriber and a listener. If you enjoyed the banter and the bold ideas, show us some love. Hit the like or subscribe button to get your regular dose of freedom so you can share it. Also, please share the WallBuilders podcast as well. The Fresh Freedom Podcast is your ticket to liberty, available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, X, and Rumble. Until next time, to keep your mind fresh so that we can stay free, we'll catch you next time on the next episode of Fresh Freedom.
You changed it up.
Wow.
What do you think? Wow, landed the plane. Wow.